South Africa has funded residential care beds for 18,000 elderly people. There are 6.6 million of them.
Welcome to a special report from CanDoo World. CanDoo World bridges the world of real estate and artificial intelligence and provides AI skills and governance training as well as real estate transaction and funding advisory services. I'm Sarah, joined as always by David, and today we are doing something a little different. Just one story told in full because it deserves it. South Africa's retirement property market has quietly split in two, and where you land in that split has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with what you owned, what you saved, and what the system decided you were worth. Let's get into it.
According to Lightstone's data, South Africa has approximately 650 purpose-built retirement complexes. Across those, there are roughly 100,000 units in total, and only 44,000 of those units are formally registered as individual property deeds at the deeds office. That's the formal retirement sector, the full supply.
And the demand side?
6.6 million South Africans aged 60 and over, growing at 2.8% a year, the fastest growing demographic in the country. Formal retirement housing covers roughly 2.5% of the retiree population. That's not a gap, that's a structural absence. The system was never designed for the numbers it now faces.
And that number is only going in one direction.
Correct. Statistics SA and the United Nations project that South Africa's elderly population will reach approximately 12 million by 2050, roughly 16% of a total national population of 75 million. That's almost double what it is today, in 25 years. The 2.5% coverage figure we have now doesn't get better on its own. It gets worse. Every year that supply doesn't keep pace with growth in that demographic, the shortage gets worse and the opportunity to supply grows.
So, who is the market designed for?
According to 80/20's national segmentation, published in their Golden Years on Credit report for the fourth quarter of 2025, roughly 2 million retirees fall into what they call the comfortable retirees segment. Formal savings, property equity, asset-backed credit. About 300,000 still carry active home loans, and there is real money moving through this tier.
What does the pipeline look like for them right now?
Active and institutionally serious. Evergreen has expanded at Val de Vie and Paarl, homes from 8 million rand, with a 150 million rand lifestyle centre going in. They're also building at Sitari in Somerset West and Noordhoek. Rabbi's Oasis Life development in Sunningdale is priced between 2.3 million rand and 4.5 million rand. Aurea is developing Coral Cove on the KZN North Coast. Apartments from 1.69 million rand, villas from 3.8 million rand. These are not marginal projects. They are selling.
And then there's the growth point story,
which is the clearest signal yet that senior living is becoming a formal institutional asset class. Growth Point Healthcare acquired Aurea Senior Living, 4 established communities in Johannesburg and Cape Town, for 2.4 billion rand. That's a major listed company making a multi-billion rand bet on the comfortable tier. And Aurea's own pipeline, Coral Cove and others, continues under the existing brand. When capital of that scale moves in, the asset class has arrived.
Is there a sense of the commercial scale of this market?
Lightstone data puts the figure at approximately 29 billion rand spent on retirement sector properties over the last 5 years, more than 15,000 transactions. Average price, 1.9 million rand, and more than half of those 44,000 units are valued above 1.5 million rand. This is not a niche market. It's a substantial and growing segment of the residential property economy. Roughly 60% of all homeowner transactions in 2025 were driven by downscaling, people releasing equity from a larger primary residence and moving into something smaller and purpose-built. That's the primary demand engine for everything we've just described. And in the Western Cape, it's the only province in the country showing a net property inflow for buyers over 60. And they bring their money with them. And people are looking for lifestyle infrastructure.
And who is actually doing the buying in this market?
Predominantly women. According to Lightstone's 2025 data, by the time a buyer reaches age 74, 73% of sold property purchasers are women. That's a survivorship effect. Women outlive men, and they are making the retirement property decision alone, often after the death of a spouse. The retirement property market, at its peak buying age, is largely a women's market. And that has implications for how developments are designed, how financial products are structured, and how the legal protections we'll come to later in this episode actually land in practice.
Here's attention though. The comfortable retirees are the future market for all of this. But there's data from the two-pot system that worries me about how that future looks.
It should. By March 2025, 2.4 million South Africans had applied to withdraw from the two-pot savings pot. 43 billion rand paid out. By June 2025, it was 4 million withdrawals and 57 billion rand. But here's the telling part. When the new tax year opened in March 2026, Alex Forbes received 140,000 claims in the first week alone. And at Momentum, 62% of March claimants were third-time withdrawers. This is not emergency use of savings. This is habitual drawdown, the retirement savings base of the 30s to 50s cohort. The people who should become the next generation of comfortable retirees are liquidating that future right now.
Let's go to the other side of the divide, because the 4 million aren't just being underserved, they're often invisible in the numbers.
The 80/20 report calls them humble elders, roughly 4 million retirees who are grant-dependent, survivalist, with no meaningful asset base. That figure is independently corroborated by Stats SA. Approximately 73% of South Africa's 6.6 million elderly receive the SASSA Older Persons Grant. That's close to 4.8 million people. Their monthly income from the state, 2,315 rand.
Private frail care costs between 30,000 rand and 40,000 rand a month. Compare that to the average, after income tax, South African household income of about 15,000 rand per month, less than half what private frail care costs.
So the grant covers less than 8% of that, and the state's residential alternative, 18,000 funded care beds nationally, held in just under 400 non-profit organization-run facilities, covers a fraction of the need. There's no expansion. Some non-profit organizations are deregistering under real-term funding cuts.
And the Special Housing Needs Program? That was supposed to be the state's answer to exactly this.
Approved in 2022. As of early 2026, not a single facility has been built under it. 13 pilot projects identified, 12 applications submitted, none in construction. No ring-fenced budget line in the current medium-term expenditure framework from the Ministry of Finance. The program exists on paper and nowhere else.
Where are these 4 million people actually living?
In family homes, often overcrowded ones. Statistics SA's 2023 Child Series data shows 6.7 million grandparents living with 9.7 million children under 18. Nearly half of grandparent-headed households with children have more than 6 members under one roof, and 65% of those household heads are grandmothers. It's not a spare room, it's a family arrangement, and it's holding up 3 generations simultaneously.
And the geographic picture makes it worse.
The provinces with the deepest need, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, have virtually no formal retirement supply in the pipeline. Almost every named development in the last 24 months is in the Western Cape or Gauteng metro. The market is delivering supply where it is least needed, to the people who need it least. That is not a market failure. That's a market working exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed for this problem.
And for the people who are in the comfortable zone, this geographic concentration has actually worked in their favor, hasn't it, in terms of what their properties are worth?
Significantly. Lightstone data shows Western Cape residential prices have risen 141% since 2010. Johannesburg is up 71% over the same period. That appreciation is the equity engine that makes the downscaling trade work. You sell a 5 million rand house in Constantia, and a 2 million rand life rights unit becomes entirely affordable. But it also illustrates the self-reinforcing dynamic at work. Property appreciation has been strongest exactly where retirement supply is being built. The comfortable tier has a market that works for them, and it's getting better at it. The tragedy is that the same dynamic, price appreciation, institutional investment, geographic concentration, has no equivalent on the other side of the divide. There's no equity release trade available when you're renting in the Eastern Cape. There's no institutional pipeline being built for a 2,315 rand a month budget.
Before we close, David, there's a legal story that came out of the courts 6 weeks ago that I don't think enough people in the property market have taken notice of.
On the 13th of February 2026, the Constitutional Court handed down its judgment in Harris NO and others versus Herald G and Broadhead Inc. And you need to know about this if you have ever bought a life rights unit or are thinking about it.
Walk us through it.
A group of retirees bought life rights in the Saint Leger Retirement Hotel in Muizenberg. The developer went insolvent. The attorneys had already paid the purchase funds to the developer, unlawfully, before the required certificates were issued. The Supreme Court of Appeal ruled in September 2024 that the retirees had no remedy against the attorneys. The reasoning, the Protection in the Housing Development Schemes for Retired Persons Act, only applies to funds still held in trust. The money had been paid out. The retirees were unsecured creditors. Gone.
That's a terrifying outcome for anyone who's put their life savings into a life rights unit.
It was. And then the Constitutional Court overturned it. The majority held that an attorney who receives funds entrusted under that act cannot escape their obligation by pointing to their own unlawful disbursement. The law treats the funds as if they were still in trust, because they should have been. The protection is restored.
So the good news is the law now protects buyers.
The Constitutional Court fixed one crack, but the Act itself is 35 years old and has never been comprehensively reformed. Frail care admission is still at the operator's sole discretion. A buyer who puts 3 million rand into a life rights unit on a campus can be refused frail care admission on that same campus years later. Governance rights are still routinely contracted away. The state of South Australia passed comprehensive retirement village reforms in November 2024. There is no equivalent bill before the National Assembly here in South Africa.
Which leaves the open question.
The Constitutional Court just rescued retirees from one gap in a 35-year-old act that governs the life savings of elderly South Africans. How many other gaps are in that act? And who is responsible for finding them before the next group of retirees discovers one the hard way?
That's the CanDoo World Special Report on South Africa's retirement property divide. We'll be back soon with a different kind of deep dive into what's changing at the SARB. The shift to Zeronia as regulators plan to restrict issuance of Johannesburg interbank average rate interest-based loans from the second quarter of this year, as well as changes to how the prime interest rate is going to look and be calculated in the future. These changes are quietly changing the way interest rate risk flows through the South African economy and what it means for everyone with either a commercial bank loan or a home loan. Until then, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and take care of the people in your life who are navigating this.